Brian Segulich, welcome to this episode of Fireside Chats. How are you?
Doing well, thanks. Thanks for having me.
No, it's a pleasure. I never know quite how to call them. I don't think they're formal enough to have like an official podcast name because they're not podcasts. But
Mm,
we're really, really pleased to have you. We've obviously we've had a series of conversations, and I know there's just so much wealth of knowledge that you've got, and would love to for you to share as part of this conversation. But before we do, I'd love for the benefit of the audience, if you wouldn't mind, just giving a little bit of an introduction on yourself, your background, and kind of what's led you into this career of business value consulting or value engineering.
sure, happy to do that. Hello everyone. My name is Brian Segulich. I lead the business value consulting team at MongoDB. For those in the audience that are not aware, MongoDB is the leading modern database and developer data platform that helps customers build resilient applications and innovate faster, which has become even more critical today in this emerging age of AI. Now, my background, I come from a combination of computer science and business background. I think even as a kid, I was always very interested in problem solving and building things. And when it came to my career in technology, I was always very fascinated in the business side. And so in my career, it's really started with IT and leadership, project management, program management. It kind of took a bit of a turn into technology strategy. And then I heard about the opportunity to work for a technology vendor after spending almost 15 years in the banking and insurance side. I thought, wow, I needed this opportunity to really broaden my horizons and see how companies across industries really work. And I found this amazing niche called value consulting, where I could apply my problem solving skills and helping customers solve problems and combine all the things that I love, technology and business and financials and math, and put that all together. And it's really, for me, it's really been a passion of mine. And really, I've really enjoyed the history of my career, starting from BMC software, where it was very much focused on IT management, and now at MongoDB, really taking much more of a view into data.
Amazing. Thank you for that overview. It's really interesting because we've spoken to several ex-BMC consultants or value engineers or value consultants. There's so many different types of titles for the role. And there was something quite special about the way that BMC did this. It's got something of a kind of a mythical folklore around it. I guess from the time of the acquisition of Blade Logic, and then the kind of the introduction, or I may be wrong, but kind of the real proper introduction of value in selling, and the more scientific approach through business value consulting. I'd love your thoughts on what was the experience like? What was it to, because I guess you kind of cut your teeth in this space at BMC, which is probably one of the two or three best places to have done it. I'd love your experience.
Absolutely. So I think where I feel very grateful and humbled by my experience at BMC was really about sales leadership who truly valued sales process and the consistency of how you're able to sell better when you establish processes for the early stage of selling, value propositions, as well as just discovering opportunities, qualifying opportunities, and then as customers move through the process and we follow that customer journey of truly understanding the problems that they're trying to solve, and as a vendor helping to understand how our solutions help solve those problems and then quantify the impact. I really saw the connection of how sales has an impact to a business case and how that truly drives faster, better, and more profitable selling. And so I've been grateful that sales leadership that truly understands the value of sales process consistency, as well as aligned to strong technology value and then the business side of that and connecting all those dots. It really was an eye-opening experience when sales truly appreciates all of the elements of that in how we help influence customers. And really it's really about a collaborative partnership in how we partner with them. and how help them make sure that they are seeing value from our solutions.
Absolutely, and we've heard from a number of these interviews just how important having that stakeholder, that leadership buy-in and sponsorship of the sales process of, because it's not very easy to roll out a value selling methodology to a team of probably a player anyway, sales reps who probably have done it their way for a long time and are comfortable in the way that they do things. Right? You got to kind of trust the process, so to speak. It sounds like you've been fortunate to have worked at a place like BMC that had that, and equally MongoDB, because a lot of the sales leadership has also come from BMC, if I'm not mistaken.
Absolutely. Yeah. Generally speaking, when you have sales leaders that move from one company to the next, they start pulling the thread of all the other people that they have been successful working with. And absolutely, yeah, that trend continues.
I guess when sales teams have these QBRs, or the regular kind of sessions where they talk about forecasts, what is the involvement of the BVC team? Are you involved in those kinds of forecasting, or is it a separate type of meeting, so to speak?
So I think every company is a little bit different when it comes to those QBRs. And at MongoDB, there is definitely that element of influence and consideration. I think that sales really looks to value consultants for advice and guidance on
Yeah.
what are potential opportunities or approaches on how to sell to customers, how to understand and clarify that customer pain and their needs and how we help sell. So there's absolutely that level of alignment. Obviously, when it comes to QBRs, sales leadership is really there and looking at forecasts and the deal size of things. And I think as we've evolved in the history of going from a sales process where there has been very much the upfront contract and purchase decision. Now we're making this shift in the industry towards more product-led growth and SaaS offerings. So these QBRs are actually evolving quite a bit and really changing in the way that we're selling and making sure customers are getting value as well.
Interesting. And you mentioned a little bit about the partnership between sales and value consulting, right? Clearly, it's a team sport, right? Value selling.
Mm.
How much does the sales rely on the value practice to help qualify the deal, to help identify pockets of value that maybe they hadn't identified, and how do you do that in an evolving, growing way?
I would say that when it comes to how we help customers and how we help sales, again, it really depends on the product and how the go-to-market sales process works. So in that side of it, you have to think about and consider if you're talking about a product that has upfront pricing and the customer is expected to make a decision, they can't use the product until they've gone through that really holistic evaluation process. There's a lot more earlier stage conversations that are happening in terms of how we understand the value, the customer pain through the discovery process, and how we help customers in those early stage decisions. There's another aspect where it's really about enabling sales to make sure that they can have those value conversations. And obviously, with value engineering organizations, you don't have as large a headcount. And so you have to prioritize where in the sales cycle you're going to dedicate that effort. And so as you start seeing sales organizations looking to scale their practices and focus on overall optimization of where are every team's skills best valued, you really want to take a look at where in the process is that best use of time. And for us, we look at it as how do we enable the people who are there on the ground floor, whether it's sales or solution consultants, or perhaps even CSMs, customer success, how do they have that value story And really, the value engineering organization is more of, I would say, kind of the value specialist that gets involved in the much larger accounts, the more complex accounts. And so we kind of straddle both sides of it with the enablement and advisory skill, as well as focusing on those larger accounts that really require more of the dedicated value engineering, business case, and strategic approach to customer integration.
Got it. And we come across, it depends on what company, but certain companies, I guess they place the value team within the pre-sales organization, and others kind of as a separate unit. What is some of the rationale behind both?
It's a great question. I'm sure you'll hear a lot of different questions depending on who you ask. I don't know that there's really one particular right answer for that. I think every organization is making the prioritization decision that optimizes impact and profitability. And
You would hope.
right. That's fair. I would say that the companies that are prioritizing revenue growth will dedicate more of that effort and into the pre-sales side, and the post-sales really, it also kind of talks to the rest of the organization structure, and is the post-sales organization, whether that's customer success or some other organization, can they handle some of those conversations? And then of course it's really finding that best balance and fit.
That talks a bit to the revenue bow tie model, right? Which is really where the impact, post-sales impact is so critical for profitability on deal by deal basis, but equally for longevity. Where do you see the value practice evolving in that post-sales value realization piece? Because it feels like there's more and more buzz around that side of the, of the customer relationship these days.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see the industry evolve. Absolutely. With the post-sale side, I don't know how many organizations are truly appreciating and valuing the opportunity to really do post-sales right. And of course, when it comes to any vendor organization, there has to be a priority around growing the company and the revenue side of it from a pre-sales perspective. So it can be easy to forget about the post-sales side and just kind of think of it as, well, that's a part of the organization that will figure itself out. And we've got our bigger fish to fry up in the pre-sales side. So they may defer that. Now, you would hope that you've also got still a good line of sight to the retention metrics and to understanding, perhaps even tiering your customer base to understand how much time you're spending in a post-sale side. But the value side is so important. In fact, I am such a believer in the value realization side that I'm not sure even in the industry today that there's a true appreciation for the best practices that will truly maximize retention and offer those upsell opportunities.
Yeah, I agree. And it is more and more people like you are for that very reason that we speak with are paying more and more attention to that space. And, it's still relatively new, right? Because you also need quite a lot of tracking to be able to really pull in the right kind of metrics, the empirical information to guide insights and conclusions on how to formulate a strategy. And that leads me a little bit to other conversations that we've had where we're hearing more value practices talk about this concept of reverse ROI, where you kind of, on the post-sales, identify benchmarks across different existing customers and try to apply those to the pre-sales. Would love your thoughts on that approach as well.
Yeah, I'm a firm believer on that. I think that when it comes to customers, I don't see a very good understanding or even really a prioritization around what is the value of the technology that we're spending our money on. You might see it from procurement teams or finance teams saying, hey, you're spending too much time. Right? And exactly at renewal time, you're going to see that conversation happen. And it really, from a vendor perspective, I think that's where the onus is on demonstrating value and making sure that customers appreciate the value, because we all know customers are so busy. They're just trying to keep the lights on. They're trying to impact their business. They're not going to prioritize an understanding of the value for every individual piece of technology that they're using. Now, they should be, because that's how they should be also demonstrating the value of what they're investing in back to their own leadership to justify just their own IT budget. I mean, there was a time in the past where cost and budgets were so constrained that organizations needed to prioritize that. And now, as the industry has gotten as competitive as it has in this age of startups and AI use cases, there's a real gap around competitive advantage and differentiation. So sometimes that cost aspect doesn't, well, it gets overlooked. So how do we kind of balance both sides of it? Because you really do need both. Now, I would say that reverse TCO or reverse business case is a great opportunity. And it doesn't have to be in the context of an actual business case. It can be just a playback of the value and the rationale, and reminding the customer of the reasons why they made a decision to invest in that technology in the first place. Honestly, a lot of the time, customers kind of forget why they made the decision. Or it could be just the organization kind of turns over and you have new leaders and they don't necessarily have that history. So it's important to have that playback.
Absolutely. That's why it's so critical. And also, for the benefit of the audience, would you mind just describing how you define what is reverse ROI or reverse business case? Because we talk a little bit about the jargon, but it'd be good to get from you, like, what is the process and what is the benefit of doing it?
Sure. So if we talk about it simply from a pre-sales perspective, it really comes down to what was the current state or the before state, to say, how are you doing things before? And then the after state, or in a post-sale, it would become the new current state. How are you doing things to get today, and how are they better? So if you're thinking about kind of a reverse business case, the idea is, number one, you want to validate that the business case that you initially built out, are you achieving that value? And you're kind of playing it back. So whether there are key metrics that were the drivers for that impact that you're comparing towards, or in some cases, it's just acknowledging the value of what you're using today in the context of what was the alternative state that you would have been if you hadn't chosen this solution. So that's where you kind of play back. And to be honest, when you don't have that before state, you kind of have to work with the customer to ask them, well, what would you have done if they didn't have that information in the past?
How collaborative do you find customers in going through that process with you?
Well, now you're getting into some really meaty questions, because the reality, again, is that not every customer has the time to work with you as a vendor to consider why they are getting that value. And to be honest, some of them have such higher priorities that they just can't make that resourcing commitment to actually help you out. And so there is a little bit of secret sauce there in how do you manage to have that value validation without actually having a formal engagement. Because I think historically, if you were to rewind 10 years ago, it was a lot more common to have a formal engagement and have this kind of value realization review. I think in this age of speed, a lot of customers don't have that time. And so you have to find other ways to achieve the same goal, where you might not necessarily have that opportunity for a full team collaboration. Of course, you kind of have to judge that based on the relationship you have with each customer on whether they're willing to do that or not.
Yeah, and it's ultimately it's a risk to the vendor, because, like you said, because at renewal time, if you haven't documented impact, then you're leaving yourself, quite open to procurement, who kind of do things in their own silos, coming with their own versions of the story and say, look, we bought X, we're getting Y, we want a 20% discount or reduction. So you kind of lose control of the narrative, right?
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah, we had that in my previous company with a large insurer that the purpose of the purchase of our technology was to help them differentiate in the market. And they kind of didn't care as much for engagement. It was more a competitive bolt on to their service. But of course, when if they didn't roll it out, then there was they're buying X licenses and only getting a certain percentage of those licenses being activated. When time came 3 years in to renew, procurement sees, well, we only got 20% of licenses being used. We want a reduction. And so the narrative becomes completely different. And then you're stuck in a position where, yeah, the numbers say one thing, but the actual benefit that was originally used, the actual benefit to purchase was something else. But, procurement, they create these walls and they don't want to be influenced by the decision makers and that originally bought the product. But that's my problem, not yours. Anyway, it just reminds me of what happened.
Yeah, now you're getting into deal strategy. Yeah, right. You're getting into deal strategy and procurement strategy there as well, which definitely there's definitely a playbook around that side as well.
For sure. But that's maybe for another day. And what to you makes for a successful rollout of a business value practice? Like, what are the skill sets? Because it feels like the very profile of skill set that you shared, which is your background, mathematics, modeling, that kind of thing, with combined with business acumen and a degree of empathy, right? Because you need to be able to connect with your buyer. Yeah, I guess. Yeah, what is the ultimate profile and of the ideal value consultant, and how do you roll out a successful practice in an organization?
That's definitely a great question. When I am looking for candidates in value consulting, value engineering roles, I sometimes joke with my peers that we're really looking for unicorns and people with T-shaped skills, which is people that have a breadth of experience on the horizontal, and that it can be business. Usually it's business or some level of high level technology. And then there's a level of depth on the vertical. And so that depth on the vertical, it usually is around finance, but it can be other aspects. And obviously every vendor organization, depending on how technical the product sale or how business oriented the product sale, you would judge your candidates based on the need for that level of depth in that particular subject.
So more like traditional sales engineer versus business consultant, right? Those are kind of the two, what is it? The two sides of the range, right?
Right. Like you can think of the business MBAs, and then you can think about your technical specialists on other side. And depending on your product, you would judge where is each candidate and where are those guardrails and what's kind of the threshold of what's the minimum that you need and what is the best case scenario, and then identifying those key skills as part of your recruitment process. It is definitely not an easy thing to find, and so it definitely requires a level of analysis when you start recruiting and what kind of profiles you're looking for sure.
And it's not surprising when you see in the market when one person moves, maybe a BBC leader, some of the people that were at that other company with them move along with them, because it seems to be quite also relationships, right? These are people that have worked together, they trust each other, they highly regard each other, and they kind of move in teams, right?
Absolutely. Well, the value engineering community especially is a very niche, small community. So you definitely see people who you trust, and you're going to want to work with them again. Absolutely. Absolutely. Similar to the sales leaders that have appreciated various value engineers from their time in previous companies, they're going to go back to those people that they know they can trust and know that can execute.
Especially if they've delivered results together. It's like, in sports, right?
Absolutely.
If you win together, then go to different companies together, right? And I guess companies will recognize that when they hire for those teams, right? If they know what they're hiring for. And just think about some other areas of potential of value. So when you were at BMC and you moved over to MongoDB, obviously the products are different. How did the approach of what you were doing change or need to evolve based on the product set? Because we talked a little bit about like skill sets, and like you said, depending on the nature of the product you're selling, it could be more technical, it could be more business consulting. We do see a lot of ex McKinsey's or management consulting people come into the world of BVC, business value consulting, for that very reason. Yeah, how did the need for the role evolve from BMC into MongoDB?
It was definitely an evolution. And for me, the most interesting part around comparing BMC to MongoDB, first of all, BMC was very much an upfront pricing based approach. So there was heavy upfront selling that was required, heavy problem identification, impact analysis upfront, because really everything was about getting to that procurement decision with the customer. So you needed that very formal business case. It was really a high level of effort involved in the early stages of the sales process. And it was very use case oriented as well. Now with MongoDB, we're selling a developer platform. We're actually focusing on the workloads that a customer is interested in, and we're dealing with very technical personas that are really intensely tactical and technical, at least as a starting point. And so from a sales process perspective as well, especially after we launched our cloud managed service, database as a service called Atlas, it was really about, once the customer just had a high level idea that, hey, we want to manage our databases in the cloud, let's get the contract out of the way. You don't have to make an upfront commitment. So that decision bottleneck and friction was not the concern. It was more about making sure the customers were finding value as they started using it. So again, talking to the shift in terms of post-sale value realization and value maximization, that became the focus. And so that really, with MongoDB, obviously there was a much more technical focus, as well as really trying to be crisp on, a customer has a very specific problem they're trying to solve. You can solve that, and you can do your TCO analysis, you can do your ROI analysis. You definitely want to make sure that the customers appreciate the holistic value, especially in the context of cloud and development and data platforms, where there can be a very technical mindset and a very tactical mindset that customers initially come in with. It's really about, what's the holistic value? And I like to say, customers come in with a TCO mindset, total cost of ownership, and we really want customers to appreciate the TVO, the total value of ownership mindset.
Brilliant. And how often does net present value and IRR come into the metrics that you're presenting to the CFO of an organization?
That's another good question. So it really, again, it really comes down to, what do the customers need, and what is the level of the decision making? Where's the budget?
The persona. Yeah.
How is that budget being allocated, and who's allocating that budget as well for how much they need for it? So I would say NPV IRR becomes much less of a challenge for us in that context at MongoDB, because simply we're talking with technologists, and the technology budgets are owned within that technology portfolio. They're managing their budgets the way that they need to. And of course, if we're talking about a major use case, it can definitely still involve NPV and IRR, but it's usually as part of a much larger initiative, and we're just one component of the overall business case.
Interesting. I've been a customer of MongoDB for the better part of 15 years. My last two companies have been loyal customers.
Nice.
I'm on Atlas every day, checking usage and business case generation. We have my CTO, co-founder and CTO. He created a couple of dashboards for me to check. It's a great service.
Nice.
I'm not just saying that. We love the product. Well, look, Brian, I have just a couple more questions for you, if you don't mind. The first one is, we talked a lot about roles and teams. From your experience in working in the space, who's the best value engineer or business value consultant that you've worked with?
Honestly, I've worked with so many fantastic value consultants. I would say the absolute best that I've worked with is Lisa Smith. She is an amazing business, technology, and value savvy individual. Just unbelievable breadth and depth in her skill sets. Truly one of a kind in my mind.
Well, I'm sure she'll be happy when we shout her out. And and in your experience, who are some of the best sales account execs, value sellers that you've worked with, kind of in hand on deals?
Well, I would definitely say for me, and this kind of brings me back to my BMC days, Rob Watson, who is one of those sales leaders who is truly bought into the art and science of selling, methodical with sales process, qualification of opportunities, the importance of value. When we worked together, I believe that he had just gotten promoted to become regional director during the BMC days, and he's now sales VP at Observe, a data observability startup, and just has had amazing success with at multiple startups.
Brilliant. Well, thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Brian, thank you for today.
Thank you.
Really enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you so much. Honored to be here. Thank you.